Hello, I am Denise Thomas, and a few years back, I dedicated an entire year to establishing the habit of writing. And here's what happened. Well, back in 2016, I began on January 1st with the habit of writing every day. And I wrote every single day for that entire year. What prompted that for me was this idea that if I wanted to be a writer, that I needed to be writing, even if it was just a little bit every day. You see, back in 2016, I was working full time as a professor. I was married. I had three kids, four and under. I had a parent who was deteriorating with Alzheimer's and came to live with us. And I was working as a counselor seeing clients. I had this very full, overflowing plate. And yet I had just as much of a desire to be a writer. But how can you call yourself a writer if you're not writing? And that's where I had been. I mean, I had a lot of reasons to not write. I mean, any of those reasons added enough to my plate to not have time to write. But I wanted to. I wanted that identity of a writer. In the back of my mind, I had this desire still to write a book. I wanted to do writing that contributed to my field of counseling. I wanted to write books about my passion of play therapy. I wanted to write books that would be helpful to the students that I was training. And mostly, I just had this need to get words out. So in 2016, I didn't have a book in mind. I didn't have a plan even to write a book in that year. I just wanted to establish the habit of writing. And so that's what I decided that I would do. I committed that I would write 500 words each day. I thought I could manage 500 words. I knew that I could do that in about 30 minutes. And I was committed enough that I believed somewhere in my day I could find 30 minutes to fuel this passion. And I did. For 365 days, I never missed a day of writing. Now, sometimes I wrote in the morning, sometimes I wrote at night, sometimes I wrote in little blocks of time in between things that I was doing. I wrote when I traveled. I was so committed that I would write every single day that I made it happen. And by the end of that year, I would love to tell you that I had written a book, but I hadn't. I had written a lot of words, but none of them were in a book. But here's what happened in 2017. I went to a conference and an editor found me after a presentation and asked me if I wanted to write a book. Now, by that time, my parent had moved in with us. His declining dementia was worse than we thought. I still had three little ones and a full time job and a client load. I had so many reasons to say no to writing a book. But because I had written every single day for, by that point, more than a year, I knew that I could do it. It might take me a while to write a book, but I knew that I could do it. And in fact, I did. I wrote a book about a passion project of mine on play therapy, and it's a book that I continue to be really proud of. What would happen if you committed to write every day this year? What could the possibilities be? Well, in this video, I want to walk you through how to set up that habit so that you'll be ready when your chance to write a book comes along, maybe in 2025. Well, at the beginning of the new year, we're often talking about habits. We're often highly motivated to make things better in our lives. Some people call them resolutions, some people call them goals, some people call them intentions, but regardless, there's this energy and this motivation to somehow make our lives better. But when we talk about habits, it often feels rather boring. I mean, it's a habit. It's something that you do over and over and over, day in, day out. And yeah, sure, it makes your life better, but it's kind of boring. But the habit of writing daily may open doors that you didn't even know were accessible to you. So, how do you set up the habit of writing every day? Well, the first step is always to decide to do it. I mean, I want you to really think about this for just a second. Is this something that you really want to commit to? I mean, for 365 days, do you really want to dedicate 30 minutes out of each of those days? I mean, that's going to be more than 180 hours that you are dedicating to writing if you limit it to only 30 minutes a day. I mean, that's a chunk of time. Are you really willing to commit it? Now, I will also put it in the other perspective in that out of a 24-hour day, 30 minutes is 2% of your day. Could you dedicate 2% of a day to writing? You view it however you want, a lot of hours or a small percentage of time. The consistency is how it adds up. So the first step is always to weigh it and decide if it's really something you want to commit to. Because if you commit, I really want for you to be able to commit wholeheartedly. The second step is to determine what, where, when, and why. You already know who. You are the who. But what are you going to write? Where are you going to write? When are you going to write? And why are you going to write? You might want to spend a little bit of time figuring out those things today. The third step is to log your progress. Ho, ho, ho. Ho hum. Talk about boring spreadsheets. What? But the thing is, what you turn your attention to is what you will do. By gathering the data of how often you write and how much you write, it's going to give you a real picture of your writing habit. I've been doing this for years now. It's one of my favorite parts of the day because I get such a kick out of watching the word count grow. But it is really important to log your word count. The fourth step is to just do it. I mean, writers write. So now, until you decide to end this habit, commit to writing daily or nearly daily. If you do this for years, you will inevitably miss days. As you cultivate the habit and it becomes really solid, you may decide something like, I'm going to take the weekends off, or I don't write on Sundays, or I do a different kind of writing on those days. You can change up all of those kinds of things, but you have to be writing and you have to cultivate the habit before you can tweak the habit. So the fifth step is to break down your writing into smaller parts, set some milestones, and then celebrate when you achieve those milestones. If you are working on a book project, it naturally divides into chapters. So perhaps those could be your milestones. Calendars have months. So if you write daily for a month, that could be your milestone. I set the goal of writing 500 words every day, which means that a 30-day month has a goal of 15,000 words. And every month, I am striving for that goal. Even when I miss a day, that still becomes my monthly goal. And I'm often just naturally making up the word count because I know that that is something that I'm heading towards. And that's how you set up the writing habit. I'll talk more about habits in another video, but I hope that motivates you that if writing is something that you really want to do, that you can do it. You just need to dedicate a little bit of intention around the habit of writing. Well, Aristotle said, you are what you repeatedly do. Writers write. Is writing something that you want to repeatedly do? Well, I mentioned earlier in the video that you need to find your what, when, where, and why. If you are looking for your why in writing, the deep motivation that will help you write your book, then you might want to watch this video next.